There's a couple big gaming news stories we have to talk about today, starting with an update around this ongoing and ever-evolving chip shortage situation that we find ourselves in 2022 and beyond, and a new update around how long this shortage may last and what it means for new next-generation hardware that could be indeed in development right now. Then the big talking point for today's video has to do with Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, a potential story spoiler, so I will put that warning on it as it does come from a legitimate voice actor that has worked on this title, and we have to break down all the details and talk about what this could mean for the story of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 when it releases. What's up, Nation? If it's your first time on the channel, make sure you join Sunbro Nation by subscribing below, hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. As I mentioned, guys, we got a couple major stories to get through today, so we have to kick it off with a conversation around the ongoing 2022 and beyond chip shortage that, of course, was spurred from the real-world events of the pandemic, and it caused massive supply chain issues across the board, really affecting all industries and definitely heavily affecting the gaming sector as we rely on things like GPUs and CPUs to process all of the gameplay that we enjoy on our modern consoles. And there is now a big update around this story around how long we can expect it to last before things essentially go back to normal, where you can just walk into a Walmart, find whatever console you want, walk into a Target or a Best Buy, you see the PS5 in stock, you see the Series X in stock, and you can choose if you want it. You see the Switch OLED and maybe even whatever Nintendo is cooking up past the OLED on the store shelves, and it's not this hassle of check out as fast as you can online before bots buy them up and try to resell them on eBay. The scalper market is insane and ridiculous in the modern era, and up to this point in time, it's been believed that maybe 2023 is the light at the end of the tunnel when everything really truly does catch back up. But according to a major chip manufacturer CEO, we may be in a little bit longer than that in terms of the overall shortage that's clearly affecting the entire globe. So to quickly break down the details, I do want to hop over to VGC where they have an article typed up with what has been said, so let's read through that together. Chip shortages will now continue until 2024, Intel CEO claims. Console and graphics cards may continue to be in short supply as a result. The CEO of Intel has warned that the global shortage of semiconductors will now likely last until 2024. Pat Gelsinger had previously told CNBC that he expects the issue, which has caused production issues and shortages for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, and graphics cards, wouldn't end until 2023. However, in a new interview with CNBC's Data Check, Gelsinger updated his prediction and now expects the chip shortage to last into 2024. According to Gelsinger, shortages are likely to continue because key manufacturing tools aren't as readily available as hoped, meaning there aren't enough chips being made to supply demand. That's part of the reason we believe the overall semiconductor shortage will now drift into 2024 from our earlier estimates of 2023, just because the shortages have now hit equipment and some of those factory ramps will be more challenged, he explained. In October 2021, Gelsinger predicted we're in the worst of it now. Every quarter next year will get incrementally better, but we're not going to have supply-demand balance until 2023. So clearly, if you are somebody who is still hunting for what is now a current gen console but still feels like next gen because they haven't been available easily since launch, being the PS5 or Series X, it's still going to be very tight supply on those from the sounds of things. And clearly, this is an industry-wide problem. So while Intel doesn't directly manufacture the GPU or CPU for the Switch, it is still something that will ultimately affect Nintendo's dealings as well, as we just talked about yesterday, that they're expecting lower than usual forecasted Switch sales because of this supply issue, and even they are being directly affected on their bottom line and the revenue they can generate because they can't source the parts to supply all the OLED model, base console, and Switch Lite components out there to get them on retail store shelves so you can go easily pick one up. So while it's disheartening news, it's also an interesting talking point around the fact that 2024 is definitely far off, and I think if you've been around on the channel for a while, you will know that in my personal opinion, I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility that Nintendo is cooking up some kind of Switch revision, more powerful version of the current hardware in something like 2023, maybe even as soon as launching around something like the Breath of the Wild 2 launch. Now, obviously that's just speculation, but I can definitely see Nintendo wanting to launch new hardware alongside a marquee title like this, and things like the chip shortage would directly affect those plans and what they can actually produce to launch. Not saying they can't source the parts, but just that it's going to be one of those scenarios where if Nintendo does release any kind of more powerful hardware hardware and it's enticing enough for base Nintendo Switch users to go out there and try to upgrade to this more powerful model, well then that's obviously going to create an entire Series X and PS5 situation all over again, with Nintendo becoming one of the most hard consoles to find out there, because clearly with the 100 million plus install user base that Nintendo has achieved with the Switch, they are at an all-time high with hype and momentum around their brand, and they're continuing to drop fire titles month in and month out. Like, definitely it's an exciting time to be a Nintendo fan. It's also one that's very interesting to watch unfold and see where their strategic moves will come into play. So maybe we are a little bit further out until Nintendo can source something like a more powerful Switch, but it's also not out of the realm of possibility. And if they do choose to launch it in a current chip shortage environment, well then you know what that means. It is going to be whoever can click the checkout button the fastest, hopefully beat out the bots and not have to pay scalper prices for new hardware. So I want to hear from you guys on this particular story, how you feel about how this whole chip shortage has affected gaming and many aspects of the Nintendo Switch specifically. And bonus question, do you think that Nintendo's cooking up any kind of new hardware to launch in something like 2023 or maybe even as late as early 2024, or do you think we're still quite a ways out until we see any kind of new hardware from Nintendo? So I look forward to hearing from you guys in the comments down below around all things with this ongoing chip shortage situation. Now, the other story we're talking about today has to do with the very hype and long-awaited Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 that, of course, is now delayed until spring of 2023, and it actually has to do with a potential story spoiler, so I will put that warning on there for anybody who doesn't want to find out. It's not confirmed that this particular story spoiler would make it into the final part of the game, because clearly things do change as development time goes on, but it is directly from an Italian voice actor who has actually worked on the project coming out of his mouth, so it's pretty much as credible as it gets. It's not an insider claiming that they have some kind of information on the story. This is directly somebody who's involved with the development and creation of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, and they were recently interviewed where some of the beans did indeed spill. So I'll give you one last final warning. If you don't want to potentially know anything in terms of plot details for Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 before it's released, you're going to want to click off of the video now. And for anybody who is interested, I do want to kick off this conversation by hopping over to Eurogamer, where they have an exact detailed article typed up with what has been said and a large discussion after that on what this could really mean when it comes to story direction for Breath of the Wild 2. So let's quickly read through this article together. Italian voice actor spoils Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 details, now he's Goron done it. An Italian voice actor may have just dropped a big spoiler for the Breath of the Wild sequel. Pietro Ubaldi, I may have said that completely wrong, the voice of Daruk in the original game, was interviewed by fan site Lega Hyrule via Reset Era and dropped a little nugget of information. Spoilers follow. Ubaldi has recently been recording lines for Nintendo's new game, and it turns out he's not only dubbing the voice for Daruk, but also Daruk's ancestor. But Daruk the Goron champion ends Breath of the Wild in the afterlife, and who this ancestor is unclear. Ubaldi couldn't remember the name of the ancestor, though he clarified it's not Darunia, but described the role as more serious. So if you're very big into the Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 speculation on the lore front of things at all online, you probably have a decent guess on what this could be indicating. And while there's really two different paths it could be indicating, one of them, and I think the most exciting prospect, is that this does indeed reveal that we are most likely time traveling in this game, and very well could be going back 10,000 years in time to play as the ancient hero who is referenced in the story in the original Breath of the Wild. And does that mean we go back as the current Link and he meets the old Link? Like, maybe, or maybe we are actually experiencing the game in two different time periods, at which point what we do in the past in the 10,000 year gap actually affects things that happen in the current era with the current Link and Zelda. Like, this is definitely an exciting prospect and something that is very exciting to see how Nintendo may indeed pull this off. And while time travel is essentially a core part of certain Zelda games, it is not a common theme that we see them go after story-wise, and it also can create a ton of plot holes and loops in the timeline. If you look at Hyrule Historia and the entire mapped out line of how things end after Ocarina of Time's time split, well, it created three separate forks for the story and the lore. And of course, a lot of hardcore Zelda fans love to stumble into that world and figure out how all these games line up together. And so Breath of the Wild 2 may be doing that in a big way. Now, there's also a chance that this is just something that was recorded for a particular flashback referencing Daruk and his ancestor that he was talking to. Like, clearly this doesn't confirm exactly what's going on and what Nintendo is planning, but I do think with everything we've seen, the Link's essentially looking different in my opinion, with like the long-haired Link where the hair is all let down, and then the Link that you have the more traditional tied up style hair. Like, it's clear they're clearly showing us that there's going to be some major changes that unfold in the story of this game. And yes, now that this information is out there, it actually makes me that much more impatient to find out what's really going on with Breath of the Wild. It's making that spring delay feel a little bit further away, because getting legit concrete information from somebody who's directly involved with the project is a very exciting thing to talk about, and it just has me that much more hyped to find out what us Zelda fans are in store for with Zelda Breath of the Wild's 2 story when it finally releases, and what kind of new gameplay mechanics are going to come along with this, what seems to be a very exciting story plot. Because clearly, while Breath of the Wild was a big, bold new direction for classical Zelda games to evolve into an open world formula, it also came with a lot of new gameplay mechanics, and I expect nothing less from Nintendo than to double down on that this time around and really create a ton of possibilities that are super exciting. And I'm very hopeful that this is the game that does the best of both worlds in terms of what classical Zelda games delivered, with their overall experience even being somewhat more linear, but having very interesting, unique dungeons and environments that change throughout the story, and very unique items you find along the way in those dungeons, and melding that with the giant open world, open direction exploration that is Zelda Breath of the Wild, and the incredible combat system that they created with that massive achievement of a Zelda game. And clearly it took the series to new heights, as there are plenty of brand new Zelda fans that are extremely hyped and ready to see more information on Breath of the Wild 2, the story, and get just a deeper glimpse into what we can expect to launch in spring of 2023. So at this point in the video, guys, I want to hear from you all personally. I definitely want to hear your personal thoughts and speculation around what you think this Daruk reference really means for the story of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2. Do you think we're talking about time travel here, with the hero going between that 10,000 year era and the current era, and it's one Link going back and forth? Do you think that this is merely a flashback and no time travel will be involved? Do you think the game really takes place in two separate timelines, and we are sometimes playing 10,000 years in the past as that Link, and then sometimes playing as the current Link, and somehow that affects the story together? Like, I want to hear all your personal thoughts and opinions on both the stories we talked about today, but definitely excited to hear about the Zelda lore stuff, because this is definitely, as I mentioned, an exciting time to be a Zelda fan, and there's just truly so many possibilities that now come from this. So please share all your thoughts and feelings on both the stories we talked about today in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Make sure you check out yesterday's video if you haven't already, where we discuss an update around the heavily rumored and long-awaited Zelda Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD potentially making it to the Nintendo Switch in the year of 2022. And while it is still very possible that we see those games and even Metroid Prime 1 Remake make it over this year, also make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.